folks, and welcome to another real and raw conversation. This time, I'm very pleased to have Peter Baum, who is diving in from the UK. He is the international news editor of Blitz, which, believe me or not, is an Islamic newspaper, and Peter himself is Jewish. I think that's quite unique in the current times, if not in human history. So I think that's a great beginning to start our conversation. So if you have questions, comments, or concerns, make sure to use the chat box. It's there for you to provide your input. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I'll be very grateful if you can, just by pressing that subscribe button below. And if you enjoy what we do here on a weekly basis, I'll be very pleased if you can express your satisfaction by pressing the like button below. So I'm going to discuss Peter's trajectory from finance to media, the current so-called Islamization of Britain and Europe, what we can do to stop it, what are the root causes, what's the status, what sorts of battles are we going to face in the next few years, and what's the right way to reverse, if there is a way to reverse. And we will discuss another thing that is somehow related to the Islamization of the West, which is the isolation of Israel, because there's a reason why Israel is so much on the corner. It seems that the Hamas narrative resonates in a very dangerous way in Europe among many spheres, the academia, the NGOs, the newspapers, even among corporations. So there's a lot to be discussed here. So I'm going to pass the word to Peter, and I'll start to ask, how did you get into Blitz as a Jewish man in an Islamic organization in Bangladesh?
Okay, so that all originated from my business career. For many years, I was working for British and American banks and fund managers. And ironically, my main client base was in the Middle East, where I had very close associations with Arab banks, whether they were conglomerates or wholly owned Arab banks. And I've worked in Egypt for a couple of years, and I kept up my contacts after I left. And it was through those contacts with the Arab banks that my name was passed to a very, very brave publisher in Bangladesh, a gentleman by the name of Saladin Chowdhury. And just for all those watching this podcast, he spent 7 years in a hellhole of a Bangladeshi prison just because he wanted to formalize relations with Israel. For that political ideology, he was imprisoned for 7 years. He's been out for about 15 years now and is still promoting via Bangladesh relations with Israel. And it was through my business contacts that my name was passed to him. He contacted me and asked me if I would like to, first of all, start writing articles for Blitz from a pro-Zionist, pro-Jewish state point of view, just to see what the reaction would be from his audience. And it was very, very hostile, as you can imagine. So much so that my wife wanted me to stop because of the various death threats that I was receiving, but I persevered. And the amazing thing to me is that those who were previously very hostile to someone like myself and my ideology are on a downward trajectory, and those that want to know more and are willing to listen are on an upward trajectory. And I'm told by my publisher that he can charge more for advertising space, twice, sometimes 3 times as much for advertising next to my columns than any other of his journalists and editors. So that tells me something. And I didn't think there was any point in what I call preaching to the converted. I wanted to get to a demographic out there that didn't understand Israel, was hostile to Israel, hated Jews, etc. And sometimes you'll never be able to change that view. But I believe I have, in my own small way, managed to get a number of people thinking differently.
That's very remarkable, because there are many people out there who are just talking to the echo chamber, which I understand when there is some scope, but you need to go beyond. You need to face risks, and I think you are that brave. So you went to places where you didn't know exactly what to react, and there will be some danger. But why not? Because we need to address those that people. I think they are essential in this dialogue. You also collaborate with a couple of other portals. So if you want to mention that, just to have a better understanding of your background.
Sorry, mention my corporate background.
Yeah, I would like to know about the other portals that you collaborate with. I think there's some Christian organization that we just
Oh, I
talked
see.
about.
Yes. So in the UK, I'm very, very close to a Christian Zionist organization, which is on a spiraling upward trajectory called Revelation TV. It's on YouTube and anyone who has Sky channels, for example, and they devote and dedicate a number of programs promoting a pro-Israel ideology from a Christian Zionist mentality. So the same kind of agenda and ideology as the current US ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. And it's through them that I've managed to engage with a number of Christian Zionists that I never had contact with before. And they are very, very supportive of what I do and of the Jewish state of Israel, as you obviously know. So on the Jewish side, in the United Kingdom, I was a deputy on the Board of Deputies for British Jews. And unfortunately, because of their ideology and my ideology, they cancelled me after 7 years. I had the full support of the community which I represented, and they actually left the Board of Deputies and joined a fairly new organisation, which I would ask your viewers to take a look at, called the National Jewish Assembly. An excellent organisation on a par with people like Campaign Against Anti-Semitism and UK Lawyers for Israel. So those are the two main organisations within the UK that I am associated with. Apart from my own local group, I live just 40 miles east of London, and we have a Southend Friends of Israel group, which is reasonably active. Not as active as some of the Friends of Israel groups in London, but reasonably active, and we host seminars and debates and stalls, that kind of thing.
Great. Yes, it's good to know your background. That maybe it works as an encouragement for people who are looking for others, because I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of individuals out there who share similar ideas to ours, but they feel that they need to be linked to a group or to a tribe. So if you go on the internet, you're going to see there are plenty of people thinking alike. We are not that much of a minority as they want us to think. We are much more than we are told. So just encourage people to search those groups and associate as much as you can. Of course, it's best if they are just next to you in the same town, but there are also ways to do it on the internet these days. Let me focus now on the UK and on the incompatibility with Islam. So we all see UK, at least that's my view, and I think it's accurate that the UK is the mother of the liberal democracy. So we all owe that. We all have respect that the UK will introduce us to democracy as we know it today. So what aspects of Islam do you find incompatible with the liberal democracies of the West?
Okay, so like most countries in Western Europe, we are facing a flood of immigrants, the vast majority of whom are followers of Islam, and the vast majority of whom are males between the ages of 16 and 30. The previous government, that was in power for 14 years, and this government have no answer to halting the unstoppable flow of that particular demographic coming into the United Kingdom. I would suggest that given the countries that they are mainly coming from, so Afghanistan, Somalia, Iraq, most of them have been indoctrinated with anti-Semitic teachings via whatever mosques or schools they have come from. And Islam itself, we've seen from, I don't know whether your viewers have been following the British Pakistani paedophile gangs,
Yeah.
but in the last decade, numerous white girls from economically deprived backgrounds, in their thousands, have been subject to the most brutal sexual perversions from a particular demographic, the British Pakistani community, and for fear of engaging in race relations which may be negative, the British judiciary, the British police, British councillors, whether local councillors or in government, academia, have completely ignored what's been going on in our society for a decade, for fear of upsetting race relations. Now, your question was, how is Islam incompatible with British Judeo-Christian values? That is just one aspect. The way women in those societies are treated, and the belief that they can bring those similar beliefs and practices into Western society. And they've been allowed to get away with it simply because the British authorities do not want to rock the race relations boat. The other incompatibility is the way the teachings of Islam impact on those individuals and impact on those in society that are not from Islam. So all things like jihad, taqiyya, various other Quranic teachings, which are so incompatible with a democracy, a Western democracy, and yet have been allowed to thrive without any suggestion of a pushback. It just so happens that most people in the UK now are actually sick and tired of what's been happening over the last decade. And you may have seen very recently there have been protests in numerous towns and cities by the British working class white community against the flood of immigrants coming in. Unfortunately, it seems that the authorities are doing everything they can from a negative perspective against those British protesters, and doing everything they can from a positive perspective to help and support those perpetrating the crimes and coming in as immigrants. The British society is very, very split at the moment.
To that point, do you believe that you guys are living a two-tier society where that population, the immigrants coming from Africa, Middle East, can get away with certain behaviors, whether the white working class is subject to a different sort of authority?
Well, they have got away with it. So this was the ideology of multiculturalism, which has had a hugely negative impact on our society. Look, the UK needs immigrants. We do, because of our population demographics. We need people to work in our health services and in our local authorities, etc. But we don't need people coming in unchecked, whose history we don't know, whose how they've been taught in their schools and their religious schools as well, because it's clear that that group that are coming in and flooding our society do not have the same values as the kind of immigrants we want to have in. We want people in, of course we do, but not those that are a danger to us. And there's some amazing statistics, just for your viewers. This is again, if I was saying this on British TV, I would be called a racist, but these are the statistics. In terms of crimes committed, whether it's shoplifting or sexual paedophilia, let's say, by far the two biggest perpetrators of those crimes are Afghans and Pakistanis. In terms of money laundering, it's Albanians. So now again, if I said that, if there's an online safety act, if a British police officer or civil servant was watching this now and monitoring it, I could well receive a knock on the door tomorrow asking me to go into a police station because of the racist comments that I've been making, even though I'm speaking from a source that is factually correct. So again, to answer your question, two-tier policing, yes, there is. And if I were a Pakistani rapist or a thief from Albania, all I would have to say is I can't go back to my home country because I'm gay and they'll be treating me and I'd be murdered there. And I would probably get a non-custodial sentence, maybe some community work. So there is two-tier policing. And as I've said to you, British society is very much divided. I have a feeling, though, that people that are looking at it from my perspective are actually on the increase and they are no longer willing to remain silent. Yep. Whereas up until about a couple of years ago, we wouldn't have put our heads above the parapet. That's changing.
I have the same view, but I would like to understand from your end, why do you think that there is a change? What are the drivers?
The change from people protesting against the immigrants, because economically they can see how they have been so negatively impacted. So I'll give you just one example that is often given. In the UK, we have a number of army veterans who are living on the streets. Many of them are suffering from drug and alcohol abuse. Many of them have fought for their country, whether it was in the Falklands War or in Afghanistan. And their families are now broken because of the experiences they've suffered, and they have no revenue stream coming in, so they're sleeping on the streets, just as you would see a hobo sleeping in Los Angeles or New York. Now, if you come on a dinghy from Calais into the UK with no documentation and no one knows your background, you are immediately put into a 3 or 4 star hotel with shower facilities, with 3 meals a day, and even spending money to use whilst you go about a daily business while your papers are being processed, which could take up to 5 years. It's that kind of economic contradiction that is driving people to protest. And there's one other contradiction. Because of the numerous atrocities committed on British children by Pakistani Muslims, some British, some not, that have gone, which have been allowed, the horror stories are having such an impact that many parents are saying, I don't want any of my children, especially if they have girls as children, anywhere near these hotels where migrants are being housed, because some of these migrants have committed acts, and the British public are now protesting against that. We have a relatively new party called the Reform Party, which if you are a member of it, you're accused of being a racist. But basically, they're just standing up for Judeo-Christian values. It's as simple as that, really. Nothing more, nothing less. And are calling out the flow of immigration that has to be stopped. Now, for that, they're being called racist. They want to hear church bells ringing on a Sunday morning, which you don't hear anymore. They want to assure that the synagogue I go to doesn't have to have guards on the gate on a Saturday morning or when we have a Hanukkah party. And we have to lock the iron gates to let us in. That was unheard of when I was a child in this country 50 years ago. And now for the last 20 years, every time I go to my synagogue, I have to pass through security. They know me, of course, now and everything, but any stranger who's coming from another community, they have to go through the checklist. That's in this country, in a Western democracy, that's just absurd.
Yeah, I mean, it's
frightening.
Something. Sorry?
And frightening.
Frightening, very, very frightening. Like I lived in Budapest for 3 or 4 years, and one of the things that for me was was surprising that I don't remember if it was Rosh Hashanah or it was Pesach, can't remember, but one of those. Okay, and we were queuing outside of the shul or the synagogue, and there would be like 2 or 3 policemen, but that was it. That was it. So you could be queuing to a restaurant or a cafe. There was a presence of the police, but it was not a massive presence. It was like maybe 1 car and 2 or 3 policemen. That was it. That was the same would be nearly impossible in every Western city these days. And when I was telling that to the Hungarians, they couldn't believe.
Yeah. Quite incredible and quite frightening.
Yeah. So you mentioned reform, and I think they're on the rise, which maybe it gives us some hope that things can be fixed sooner than later. But why do you think the other fraction of the population is sympathetic to this view? Is it related to how the woke have indoctrinated the population?
Okay. Your audience, I think, are going to find what I'm going to say quite unpalatable. But I'm going to be truthful of how I see it. Israel has undoubtedly won the military battle. If we go back pre-October the 7th, if you think about the power Iran and her proxies had then to the diluted power it has now, and think about the capital that Iran invested into those proxies, which in the space of 2 years has been dramatically diluted, if not completely defeated. So on that front, Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, which was a byproduct of the October 7th, do not pose the kind of military threat now that they did then. So on that front, and at a huge cost to Israeli society, believe me, we understand that battle, if not totally won, I think has been quite staggering for a size of Israel to be fighting those military battles on those fronts. But the war Israel has undoubtedly lost. And this was going back before October the 7th. It's just that October the 7th in Gaza has exacerbated this particular lost battle, and that's the media battle. There is no doubt that on that front, Israel has failed miserably in getting over her message, delineating fact from fiction, and challenging effectively the grossly overwhelming weight of anti-Jewish state commentators there are. We expect it in the Arab media, but certainly in the Western media. Now, Israel is so brilliant at many things, but in media, she has failed miserably. And even when I look at the current media commentators, guys like David Mensa, and we have Sipi Hotelevi as our UK ambassador. We have, excuse me, I've got it written down. Oh, formerly we had Mark Regev as your commentator. Those people, and believe me, there is nothing personal here. I don't have any axe to grind against any individual. I'm purely talking upon this from an objective observer about Israel's lack of media nous. Those people just don't have the qualities necessary to put over Israel's case. The one person that does have, and who we're very, very impressed with in the UK, is your current Deputy Foreign Minister, Shireen, sorry, I've got her name written down for Shireen Miriam Hastapal-Hapem. She is magnificent, I have to say. And there are other commentators within Israel who do have the media nous and qualities to put over Israel's case. Dr. Einit Wolf is one of them. Other than that, it's the non-Jewish commentators such as Douglas Murray and Dennis Prager, who unfortunately is not well at the moment, who are the most elegant, eloquent and knowledgeable commentators. Now, for whatever reason, I don't understand, and we in the diaspora don't understand, why the Israeli government, if they have identified their lacking in media nous, why they haven't rectified it by training up, by showing attractive, eloquent, knowledgeable people who, when they get into a debate with a Sky News presenter, don't lose their cool, as David Mensa did recently, who are not dull and boring as Mark Regev was, who is not, what should I say, who is not eloquent, such as Sipi Hotelevi in the UK. We need or Israel needs a core of people who are media savvy, who are attractive, who are knowledgeable. Now, there are people out there, and I don't understand why Israel has not rectified this. And it's clear from what you've said that since October the 7th, it's actually got worse.
Yeah.
So if it was bad before, which it was, surely someone in the cabinet, people they talk to, can't put some a unit together, some funds together to promote those people who are used to dealing with the media, who understand the history, who can answer the difficult questions, who don't get what should I say, under pressure, who don't sweat under pressure, who don't lose their cool, who are savvy and cool and give over Israel's case. Israel can do that. Why she hasn't done that is absolutely staggering to me. Now, because of that, Jews like myself in the diaspora are having a very uncomfortable time at the moment, because it's not just the embassy of Israel they go after. They go after you if you're wearing a yarmulke, or have got a Star of David, or a little release a hostage emblem. So this is not an anti-Israel media saturation, let's go for it, kick the Jew. This is this has grown into anti-Semitism. Now, it's not the role, I freely admit this, of the Israeli government to protect Jews living in the diaspora. That's up to my government to protect me, and they're not. They're doing a very bad job, as they are in France and other countries as well. But going back to your question about the media, which is historically very left-wing, as is academia, as are the trades unions, as are younger people, etc., etc. Palestine and Gaza for them has become what South Africa was in the 80s and what Vietnam was in the 60s. And they have no idea of the history. But what is so appalling is that when we get someone from the Israeli government on to chat or to promote Israel's case, they don't have the media abilities to challenge effectively. In fact, they are quite poor. It doesn't matter that on the Palestinian side, they are sometimes equally poor, because the weight of favour is supporting them. So it doesn't matter that the Palestinians can put forward someone who's unattractive or ineloquent. Actually, they don't. They're quite media savvy. And when you see a Palestinian spokesman, whether it's the ambassador for the UK or someone from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign or an NGO like UNRWA, they are very eloquent, very savvy. They dress well, they look good. Unfortunately, Israel has not addressed that issue. It's not too late, but hopefully someone will see this podcast and say, you know what, this guy's right. Let's do something about it. Let's invest and perhaps challenge this overwhelming weight of anti-Israeli propaganda that is hitting all our television sets and resulting in the kind of protests we're seeing on our streets regularly. I'd be interested to know whether Israelis feel similarly, or whether, when I used to go to Israel and say that to them when I was doing business, we don't care, we've got America supporting us. But unfortunately, that battle has been lost. We're still losing it, Israel's still losing it, but it can be rectified providing they're willing to invest in people and in educating those people who are going to be the perpetrators of exposing Israel's media challenge.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. The so-called Asbara hasn't been doing very well over the last few years. There's also this claim that Jews control the media. Not only the media, the stock market, plenty of things, the whole universe. And to me, it's a sort of paradox, but it seems that these people don't use logic to understand things. Because if Jews control the media, how come they keep losing the war of information?
You see, this trope of Jews control the media is actually coming from a different source. It's not coming from the far left, it's coming from the far right. It's coming from people like Bilzerian and Peters, and who's the other guy? Even Rogan now. So the far right is when it comes to Jew hatred, that's where the far right and the far left meet. But again, if Israel were media savvy, we could have people challenging those people. I would not be afraid, for example, to be interviewed by anyone like a Piers Morgan or a Joe Rogan and confront them with everything they had to throw at me about Israel's legal rights, historical rights, the role of Islam, the Palestinian issue. I think I've got enough knowledge through my diligent political research to answer the questions as they should be answered. When I go on social media, one of the most prominent things coming from the far left and the pro-Palestinian mob is that Israel stole Palestinian land. This is I know I'm being very, very general, but you'll see this time and time over again. So I respond, and I've never had one person able to challenge what I'm going to tell you now in my response. I say, well, okay, then, there are 5 categories, or there were 5 categories of land in Palestine at the time Israel became independent. Mulk, Miri, Wak, from Truka, Miwat. And I tell them what each one is and the percentages of each land. Please educate me and tell me what land, in your opinion, was stolen from the Palestinians. And they don't have an answer. And when you look at the history and look at something like the Hope Simpson report or the Peel Commission report in the 30s, you will actually see the testimony of the Arab Higher Committee, the Arab leadership, testifying on oath to Sir Laurie Hammond, the British administrator, when he challenged them and said, what land has been stolen? And they say none. And he says, what? You don't mean to tell me the Zionists have stolen any land? how comes they've got the land? And the Arab testimony is they've purchased it from the Sarsouk family in Lebanon, from the El Hayem family in Syria, from various families. It's all there. Why on earth Israel has not been savvy to the history, the knowledge that is so readily available, and used attractive media personalities to get that message across, is staggering to me. And it's staggering to everyone in the diaspora. I've just, today, before I came here, I had to attend a funeral, very well attended funeral, and naturally, at a Jewish funeral, all we were talking about was what was going on in Gaza. And everyone to a person was so frustrated with Israel's poor media response that has been going on for years. And this is the one factor that will unite British secular Jewry. The other very unfortunate and growing issue are the number of what I call Jew-hating Jews. Those Jews that are more concerned with the cause of the Palestinians than the well-being of the Jewish state of Israel. I'll put it as generally as that, but you know where I'm coming from on that case, and that is very, very frustrating. Another thing that happens in the UK media, which they're very clever about, whenever there's something that's going on in Gaza that the mainstream media here can find to demonize Israel, their go-to person would normally be someone like Gideon Levy of Haaretz. Now, they don't introduce him as being an anti-Netanyahu left-wing commentator. They interview him as if he were mainstream of Israeli society. Now, I did some research on Haaretz, and if I were in a studio with Gideon Levy and the BBC commentator, I'd be going, well, look, Haaretz has a circulation of, I think in the weekdays, it's 50 to 75,000. At the weekends, it goes up from 75,000 to 100,000. It's probably the 6th most followed newspaper amongst the Israeli population. And yet this is your go-to person. Why? Because he comes from the angle of being not only anti-Netanyahu, but certainly very sympathetic to the pro-Palestinian cause and very aggressive to the Israeli point of view. But this is the tactic that British mainstream media use. And again, why the Israeli government and their spokespeople can't see that and can't challenge it, again, is very frustrating and beyond me. And I'm sure we have the people who are attractive, who are eloquent, who are media savvy and knowledgeable, that they could hold their own against any BBC commentator.
Yeah, just going back to your point when you mentioned that the British media, and it's not the British media here in Ireland, it's the same, and in Europe they pick Haaretz as a strategy to say, here you see some Israelis going against the government. So every time I see it, I'm not totally unhappy, and I will tell you why. Because I think that's a sign of democracy. That's a sign that in Israel there can be opposition, So why don't they use it as a way to tell, okay, maybe Israel it's not as bad as it is as other neighbor countries, because there are two views, or even more than two views.
You're so right. It's because Israel is a democracy that we allow freedom of speech, but that means nothing to those who want to demonize Israel. That is the furthest thing from their mind. They're not thinking, wow, Israel have a guy like this who is speaking so antagonistically towards the Israeli government and what Israel are trying to achieve. That's from their mind. All they're thinking is, there we are, that's an Israeli, that's a Jew, so therefore that gives our thinking credibility. That means we can go along and protest and be nasty, and we can daub paint on synagogues and Jewish businesses, etc. Because Gideon Levy and the likes of him give them the credibility.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I'm happy that in the course of my life, I spoke to almost like warmongers, like people who would endorse some of Smotrich sentences, to lads who refused to go to the IDF. and they went to jail. So that tells that Israel is very much diverse. There are people who are ready to conquer the Middle East, and there are those who are not even willing to join the IDF, and that's a sign of democracy. And then when people ask me, have you spoke to some on Palestine who is against Hamas? Of course I didn't, because they cannot. If they do it in public, they'll be gone. It's that simple.
You're right, but why aren't our government, the Israeli government ministers and spokesperson, providing that information? I'll give you another example that's always comes our way. Israel is an apartheid state. The fact that there are 2 million Arabs with full equal rights living in Israel, that I think there are 400, forgive me if I've got this statistic wrong. How many mosques are there in Israel? 400, I was told. Maybe I'm wrong. The number of mosques in Israel, whatever. There are mosques in Israel where Islam can be practiced. And not only that, if you're an Arab, you're given the choice that you don't have to, going into the army is not mandatory as it is for Jewish citizens. Now, all that kind of information is lost. It doesn't get said. No one's writing it in the newspapers. And yet it's there, as you quite rightly say. Israel is a true democracy, and yet is frequently accused of those practices which the opposing countries are themselves guilty of. It's staggering to me. So again, going back to your original question about the media, that's a battle that has been well and truly lost, but it can be retrieved. We can, step by step, with the right people and the right amount of knowledge, challenge the overwhelming weight of anti-Jewish state coverage, which is saturating global media at the moment and giving rise to the protests that we're seeing on the streets.
I just double check your numbers, and you are spot on, Peter. 400 mosques currently in Israel, okay. And I will add another statistic into that. That's just based on a quick research on the internet with AI, and it says the number of mosques in Israel has increased significantly since 1988, when there were only 80.
Okay, now if I were a government spokesman, if I were being faced by some clever guy from Sky TV or from CNN, and they said, well, look, Israel is accused of being an apartheid state, two of the most obvious things would be, well, hold on a minute, we've got 2 million Arabs, 400 mosques, freedom of worship, Arabs aren't mandated to go into the army, only Jews are. How can you accuse us of being apartheid? A quarter of our population is non-Jewish. Now, those facts and figures are so easy for a spokesman to provide to the general media. And could you imagine if they were being interviewed by someone like Christian Zionist, how those two simple facts would go viral or global, and people would go, what? The guy's lying, he can't be. And then if I were a government spokesman, I'd repeat it again. I'd say, Christian, I haven't got this wrong, just bear with me. 400 mosques. How many mosques, Christian, do you think there were in Gaza or in areas B and C of Judea and Samaria? And these simple facts, it wouldn't take much to effectively challenge and win back some lost ground. And again, for the life of me, and for those Jewish guys and people and pro-Israel supporters that I mix with, they are lost too. They don't understand why the government of Israel does not address this media war, which is so important.
Do you think there is a coordinated effort to delegitimize Israel's existence?
Yeah, but I think that's in the Islamic ideology anyway. I mean, this should be no surprise. I mean, again, if this goes back to the media, Very few people know that the two Palestinian charters, the Palestinian National Council Charter of 1964, amended 68, and the Palestinian Hamas Charter of 1988, both call for the destruction of Israel by jihad. Now, those charters have formed part of the Palestinian education system, curriculum, funded in UNRWA-run schools for the last 50 years. So 3 generations of Palestinians have been growing up and taught nothing but Jew extermination. And Western donor countries have been funding that education system. Now, why on earth I can't remember an Israeli spokesman ever coming up with that very simple fact. Very simple fact. Now, and by all means, let the Palestinians challenge, but it's there. It's in their own charters. Why can't we, or why can't Israel just do the very simple things, but do them well? There's another thing that I think could be challenged, which would challenge the Islamic ideology. So in the Quran, there is the Palestinians always talk about a Nakba. I'm sure you know that. The Nakba this, Nakba that, it's disaster. Nakba simply means calamity or catastrophe. There is a surah in the Quran, Surah 64:11, At Taguban, which simply states this: no calamity can occur to a people unless by the will of Allah. Okay, simple surah. Now, if I were a government spokesperson challenging the Islamic ideology, I'd be saying, well, look, the reason why why the Palestinians have suffered a calamity, which they freely admit they have, and I would refer them to that surah, is simply because in numerous surahs within the Quran, the geography they currently claim is bestowed, bequeathed, and promised to none other than the Jewish people. That's a fact. I can cite half a dozen, if not 15 surahs that identify that as a fact. Now, why, oh why, oh why, have not the Israeli government for decades seemed to challenge the extreme Islamists by those very simple facts? Again, when I put that on social media, as I mentioned with the what land was stolen, such as the, I have yet to receive, and I would like to be educated if I'm wrong, and I've been posting such posts for the last 10 years. I have yet to have one challenge that effectively proves what I'm saying as being a false narrative. Not one. And it would be such a simple thing to do, to push back against the flood of Islamic teaching, of Israel not being a democracy, of proving the point that no land was stolen. It's so simple to do. I wish I had the answers as to why this current Israeli government, and to be fair, previous Israeli governments, have not had the foresight, have not had the will, have not had the incentive to do this. It staggers me.
On a more philosophical level, I know it's a tricky question, but I like to ask to my guests, what will be, in your estimation, the root cause of the anti-Semitic sentiment that has started, more than 2,000 years back, and it's still part of humanity, because it doesn't seem to go away. There's so much education on people on don't hate other ethnicities, but when it comes to Jews, it's never trendy. So why is that, in your opinion?
So I think this goes back to biblical teachings. I think it goes back to time immemorial. For those of us who are religious, who believe in whether it's the Torah or the New Testament, I truly believe that the Jews, being a tiny minority of people who have managed to survive despite overwhelming odds against, is no coincidence that we are still here. And if you believe, as I do, in a greater power, let's say, I don't want to impress others with my religious understandings. All I can say is that I've had some experiences which prove to me that there is a greater being out there who, through, now how I want to put this in very sensitively, because the Jews have suffered so much, there are those that would say, well, why have Jews suffered so much throughout their history? Whether it's the destruction of the first or second temple, the Spanish Inquisition, or the Holocaust, or what we're suffering now. And I think this is the price to pay for veering away from what should be true to us. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a lot of, let's say, negative and hostile feedback because of that. But that's my own personal belief. Something else that is very interesting that's happening. I don't know whether you're aware of it. Forgive me if you are, and I don't wish to be seen to be ultra knowledgeable, for example. But do you have you read what's going on in Iran in the last month or so?
No, I haven't really paid attention. I was in Israel during the 12 days Iranian war, and I decided to step back for the sake of sanity. But
yeah, I can understand where you're coming from on that, believe me. But I've been following events in Iran, and there is only what I can describe. And anyone who's watching this program or listening to it can check this out. Currently in Iran, there is a drought going on, which only can be described as being of biblical proportions. Iran will very soon run out of drinking water. Many cities in Iran already have, and they can't import it. There's no rainfall, and even if there was rainfall, the reservoirs and dams are it's such a poor infrastructure that they wouldn't be able to contain the water for the public. As much as Israel has been successful militarily, I don't think it will be her military might that will bring down her opponents. But I do truly believe it will be natural disasters. And you could say, well, who's responsible for those natural disasters? Some people may say it's just climate change. I'd like to think it's something else going on out there. But for those of you watching who don't know what's going on in Iran, please just go on YouTube and key in something like Iran water crisis, and you would be staggered about what's going on. So one thing I forgot to mention, if I may just revert back, and that's about the media. I'm attending an event on Saturday called the New Media Conference, of which there will be...
Is that a Tulsi TV? No?
Yes, I've been invited with my press badge representing Blitz, and this will be a conference hosted by Tulsi TV, who's doing a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And it will be people like myself who are out of the mainstream media, pro-Israel activists, pro-Israel journalists, Zionists, etc., who are coming together to see if we can unite more effectively in getting the pro-Israel message across, because it was clear to us the Israeli government were not doing that. I sincerely hope the Israeli government send a representative. Whether they do or not, I don't know, but I hope they do, and I hope that they will analyse what's going on and take back with them the story to be told. So I just wanted to get that in, because there are people out there that are doing something about it. We're not just leaving it to the inertia of the government of Israel to try and challenge what's going on. But that's outside of mainstream media. Although there are a couple of mainstream media channels now in the UK that are definitely not anti-Israel as the BBC, Sky, Channel 4 News, CNN are. And those TV channels are called GB News and Talk TV. So, and they're growing in popularity. In fact, GB News took over from the BBC only last week as being the most watched news channel. So there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel for those in the media who are pro-Israel. So sorry, I wanted to get that in.
No problem. Actually, in that context, I would like to ask your advice for neither Vitor out there who is watching us at home or in the cafe, wherever he is, and he agrees with our views, but he doesn't know many people in his social circle who would join this sort of ideas. But they want to go ahead. They want to make a change. They want to be part of the narrative transformation. But there are all sorts of concerns. I think most people are afraid to go ahead because there are social repercussions. People can lose their jobs. People don't have someone to have a drink with. Maybe family won't be that happy to sit with them at the table. So what would be a word of encouragement for someone who they know they are right, they think they have the skills to provide some value to the table, but they are somehow hesitant because of the social price?
Okay. Now, this is interesting because this is a choice for the individual. I have children living, we have 4 children, all of whom are very pro-Zionist. 2 of them have moved to Australia because that's where their careers and their family took them. They've moved with their families. Now, they have kept a very low profile, although they would like to talk at the parties they go to, in the pubs, at work, as I'm talking to you now, but they're afraid to. And I have advised them not to put their head above the parapet because it can be very uncomfortable for them from a career perspective, from a social perspective, etc. And that's very, very sad. For those who are either ending their career or feel comfortable enough to, and are courageous enough, I must say, to put their heads above the parapet and unite, they don't have to do this unilaterally. There are organisations they can join depending on where they live, and they can log in to those pro-Israel media outlets and become part of the fabric, so that when there's a protest, when there's an event, they can join. I would encourage them in the first instance not to act alone, but to go onto social media and join those pro-Israel sites and become part of the group. Whether it's then they can go on to X and look at the pro-Israel accounts and just follow them, and they don't have to do anything. They don't even have to put a like, just follow them and build up the confidence and the knowledge base which to challenge. Only then, when they feel comfortable enough and courageous enough, should they start, and I wouldn't say acting alone, but I would just be part of a bigger group. And if they're living in the UK, join those groups and go on the various protests, or go to their local Jewish synagogue where they're hosting an event. Jewish synagogue, that's a stupid term. Go to their local synagogue and go to events. They could also unite with those Christian groups who are very, very pro-Israel, and certainly Hindu and Sikh groups who are also pro-Israel. There are also groups, believe it or not, Muslim groups, who want to create dialogue. So it's just a question, and there's enough information out there, but they have to determine how far they want to go and to which groups best suit their own personal agenda, because what may be good for them may not be good for someone like myself, who's an activist and political researcher. Someone might just want to support a group financially, for example, and keep a low profile. Others want to be more active, perhaps join their local interfaith group, for example. That's usually a good starting point from their local council. So there are various ways in to become active, but I certainly wouldn't recommend starting at the place that I'm at now.
Yeah, 100%. There are different ways to contribute. You don't necessarily need to put your face out there or even create a social media profile. Let's say if you don't want to share articles that add value to the conversation publicly on your feed, you can always send it by private message to those you trust. That's something. No one will see it except you and the receiver.
Correct.
And maybe the receiver will send it to someone else, and
exactly
somehow the message will get spread.
Absolutely right, and that's what a lot of people are doing, to be fair. Yes, so that would be another way forward. Yeah.
Talking now of Christianity, now that you mentioned, one of the things that I'm always amused when I'm in those pro-Israel protests here in Dublin, there is a huge participation of a couple of churches who are openly pro-Israel. And yes, there are many Irish, there are plenty of Europeans, but there is a significant participation of the African population who are openly supporting Israel. Yeah. And I wonder why outside of the West, say in Africa, as you mentioned, in India, these ethnicities are so much interested in the Holy Land as such. Maybe like, let's say, we in Europe were in the 70s. Why is that?
Israel has always had a connection with Africa. I can remember as a child the fantastic work Israeli agriculturists were doing in helping African nations with enhance their crop yields, purify their water, etc., etc. It was only when Idi Amin and the Russian influence started gaining control that Israel was seen as a pariah state. And that, no coincidence, ran parallel with the Arab oil wealth investing in Africa and trying to change the political dynamics, which they did very, very successfully. If you look at the Sahel countries in Africa now, they are universally Islamic. And if you go further south, Islam are committing atrocities after atrocities on the Christian populations in Nigeria and in various other countries. Isn't it remarkable when people talk about a genocide that in the Democratic Republic of Congo, since 1998, over 6 million people have been killed, 3 times that number wounded, and 11 million ethnically placed. And yet I can't think of one UK current affairs programme in the last 30 years that has even mentioned that genocide, let alone started their programme with that. That gives you an idea of the kind of world we're living in at the moment. And again, why, if we had a savvy Israeli media department, let's say, they could use that as an example. But to answer your question directly, I think it's the pro-Israel Africans are really fearful of Islam and have been taught in schools for generations about Judeo-Christian values. There is a very strong connection to Judaism in many, many African nations. Unfortunately, we don't see that turning into pro-Israel votes at the UN because I think the African countries fear that they would rather abstain than show a pro-Israel bias, which would have repercussions on their populations domestically, because Islam is very strong in the Sahel of Africa and growing stronger south. There are challenges, but unfortunately the UN, or the theatre of the absurd as I call it, is not being nearly as strong as she should be in fighting back against this wave of extreme Islamism that is infecting the African continent. I would have liked to have seen the Trump administration being more proactive. Being anti-South African is one thing, and I actually think they screwed up when the South African president went over to Trump. I think they could have been far more savvy in how they treated him. But clearly the corruption on the African continent has managed to manipulate many of the governments. The wealth of the oil-rich Arab states has infiltrated Africa to Israel's disadvantage, unfortunately. But there are some countries that still benefit from Israeli technology, especially in the world of agriculture. And I think Israel's doing that job very well. She needs to do more of it, and she needs to use her friends more. But Israel is not alone of friends. It may seem like it at the time, but there are still a number of countries out there that are supportive of Israel and her people and her ideology. Unfortunately, mainstream media overwhelmingly will only give one side of the story. You'll never see, to my knowledge, I can't remember the last time I saw a slot on Israel that was positive, even before October the 7th. Cannot find, even with all the amazing technology, whether it's in farming, agriculture, medicine, science, even in all that technology, she's not given any credit. I remember seeing one program about the way Israel has managed to, because of the number of people who have lost limbs in Israel through various wars, it was Israeli technology that managed to put these artificial walking limbs in. And there was a slot on it, and we knew it was an Israeli invention. And the program presenter not once mentioned Israel's role in this particular scientific achievement. So, yeah. Unfortunately, academia, as well as mainstream media, has been overtaken by a very hostile anti-Jewish state hierarchy and presenters.
Yeah, when let's say if they would be interested in facts, there will be all sorts of funds to cover a documentary about how Israel is an oasis when it comes to human rights, democracy, freedom of speech, gender equality, even how gays are treated in Israel versus the neighbor countries. There are so many items. They could do not even a documentary, they could do a whole series.
And again, it's frustrating that they don't. And perhaps you know people who have the ear to the government out there. I've been invited to the Israeli embassy later this month, where my friend David Collier will be there. And they're supposed to be thanking us for all the work we're doing pro-Israel activism outside of mainstream media. But I assure you, we will be pressing them again to try and get their act together. We did last time, and I have to tell you, the Israeli embassy in the UK, it fell on deaf ears. They pushed back. They did not want to contemplate the fact that they are not competent enough when it comes to media matters.
It's appalling, yeah, 100%. Just going back to the Christians topic, it seems to me that when something happens with the Christian community, whether it's in Britain, in Europe, in Middle East, of Africa, it's always neglected. And my perception is that we all saw the idea that the Christians have been in power for ages, so they were having a good time. This whole thing of white supremacy. So now they need to somehow pay the price because they were colonizers and all that. Does that make sense? That is,
it does.
That narrative.
It does, and it's Judaism has suffered similarly. It used to be the case where the countries retained its Christian values. Church bells would ring on a Sunday morning. Shops would not open on a Sunday. There were a certain number of hours devoted to Christian religious programs on our television. All that has gone. The religious knowledge that was taught in schools was promoted for all religions, but because we were a Christian country, let's say was 75% taught on Christian and 25% on other religions. Now Christianity is hardly taught at all in the curriculum, and Islam is the main religion that is taught in schools. So the country, from a Christian religious perspective, has lost its way, and I believe that the country has paid a price for that. Now, slowly but surely, people who have been so frustrated with what's gone on in the last 3 or 4 decades are trying to reconnect with their Christian beliefs. But it does the Christian faith no favours when the last Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, head of the Anglican Church, for years had been defending paedophiles. Because of his position, he sits in the House of Lords, had to resign from his position, but still sits in the House of Lords. It is stupid. And there have been a number of cases within the church, definitely within the Irish Catholic Church, but certainly within the Anglican Church as well, where paedophilia has been out of control. And yet those senior clerics have been assisted in hiding their crimes by various governments. Now, to people who want to reconnect with Christianity, when they see that kind of behaviour go unpunished, they despair. They truly despair. So, yeah, over the last, I would say, 40 years, Christianity has lost its way. And that's been a major negative for the United Kingdom. But very, very recently, we are regaining some lost ground. And I can see that in the way news items are being projected by certain television channels. Not the BBC, I hasten to add, who I think is a very, very woke organisation whose agenda, I think, is to simply undermine Judeo-Christian values. You know how CNN, their main agenda is to undermine Trump. I don't think that would be a false narrative. The BBC's main agenda for decades has been to undermine Judeo-Christian values, and for that the country has paid a huge price.
Yeah, I just that point that CNN's main objective, if not only objective, is to go after Trump. I think the moment that Trump is out of office, I wonder what kind of scope would they have. That's it, no? What then to find a second Trump?
Wait till Vance gets the presidency next.
Yeah, but it's not as much entertaining as Trump. So their views will go down. It's already going down, but after
that to me is a clear signal of how the media war is changing. The CNN's viewing audience is way down, as is MSNBC, I think that's the other one, and ABC News as well. And it seems to me that the independent podcasters, people such as yourself, but obviously with a larger viewing audience, are the way forward. And sometimes that's a bad thing as well, because someone like Joe Rogan has a huge viewing audience, huge. So does Piers Morgan, and he's done himself no favours with the pro-Israel brigade, but a lot of favours with the pro-Palestinian brigade recently.
Yeah. Now, just to that point, and Peter, I'm not a fan of Candace Owens. Huh? Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But the fact that Macron sue her, that's a sign that podcasts are having some effect. That's the only thing I would say on her favor. I'm not a fan of her. I was never a fan of her even before she came out as an anti-Semitic. I always felt there was something with her that it didn't sit right. Maybe just a personal perception. But I always felt that there was a lot of ego, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Just on a more personal level, as we come to the last 10 or 15 minutes, I would like to ask you how much of your experience in finance impacts your views on global affairs?
Hugely, because I was lucky enough to have been a profession not only that I loved, but took me all around the world. And I saw things from various angles and got involved with the local communities and tried to understand where they were at, because by doing so, that actually was a great advantage to me in my business profession. I still retain many of the contacts that I previously had. A lot of Muslim friends. I had Muslim friends at our wedding and my boys' bar mitzvahs, and that's, as I say, the reason how I managed to get this role within Islamic magazine. But I always felt the main undercurrent of anti-Semitism, wherever I went, was in those countries which were staunchly Catholic. That to me was it more so than in the Arab countries. And as I say, I've worked in Egypt, I've worked in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in the Gulf states as well. But in those staunchly Catholic countries, Ireland, France, and certain parts of Spain and Belgium, I always had this suspicion that conservative Catholicism would be as much a threat to the Jewish people as extreme Islamism. As it happens, it's the latter that seems to be the most extreme, but you will find that they have been joined on these protests by those on the extreme right of Catholicism. And that I guess was because of the old, don't forget, Islam wasn't invented until the 7th century, and Christianity goes back far beyond that. And it's always the old tropes that the Jews killed Christ. This comes up even today on social media. This still comes up. It's staggering that this happens. But going back to one of your questions about why has this happened, where are we from, how's it expecting, I still truly believe that there's a greater power out there that is controlling all and everything we do. And again, I would not wish to impose my own personal beliefs on anyone listening to this. This is just a personal belief based on personal experiences. But I always felt that it was in those conservative Catholic countries where it only needed one excuse, and the excuse is Gaza, where we're seeing this vile anti-Semitism. We're seeing it in Spain, for example. We're seeing it in Ireland, are we not? Two very staunchly Catholic countries. We're seeing it in a certain extent in France. So, and it's a huge challenge to those of us who are Zionists living in the diaspora. And many of my friends now will not go out wearing a kippah or exposing their Star of David, which I was readily proud of and expose up until 10 years ago, something like that. I don't know, 5 years ago. I'm not sure. But it's very, very concerning, very, very frightening. And as I say, it's not the role of the Israeli government to protect the likes of me. It's the role of my government. And unfortunately, my government and the government in France and Spain and Ireland are not protecting those Jewish people. And it's crazy. Even those Jews who are very against what Israel is doing in Gaza, for example, if they think they are going to be protected because of their own perverse ideology, they're not.
No, not.
Whether you're a Zionist or a non-Zionist, if you walk into an Irish bar wearing a Star of David, you're going to get beaten up. It's as simple as that. There's no point saying, hey, but I'm not, I don't support Netanyahu and I hate what Israel's doing. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and we all heard this thing that we should separate the government from the people. They say the same. Even about the Russians, there is still this narrative. Okay,
Yeah.
even about the Russians, who are not always, and I'm not defending the Kremlin, don't get me wrong, but even about the Russians, that distinction applies. Maybe not all the time, but it's still there. When it comes to Israel, it's just not existent. Everyone is responsible for the so-called genocide in Gaza. Even if you are marching in the streets of Tel Aviv against Netanyahu, doesn't matter. No, you are there in Gaza in some shape or form, giving babies. It's wrong. It's wrong because if you apply that to a population, it should apply to all. That's simple, no?
You're absolutely correct.
Just going back again to your personal path, what was the driver to leave finance and start focus on media?
Health. Unfortunately, I have had a series of illnesses which made me decide that I could no longer devote the energy to my client base that they deserved. So I was very, very fortunate to retire at quite a young age, simply not because I inherited wealth or I won the lottery or anything like that, simply because I was in a market that was exceptionally well rewarded for those of us that were above average at what they did. But unfortunately, it was very intensive, and unfortunately I became ill, and my wife made up my mind that I should retire early and devote what time I have to my passion, which is political research and pro-Zionist activity. So that's what started the ball rolling. And fortunately, because of the relationships I developed, I managed to get an into this publisher to appear on various television programs. I think what triggered it also, I wrote 3 articles for Gatestone magazine. You know, the American magazine that Mr. Dershowitz writes for. And some very
to be honest, I haven't heard it.
It's a very high-profile magazine. And the reason I stopped was because I didn't think that there was any point in preaching to the converted. I mean, there's no point going to my synagogue now and speaking to a load of people about Israel because I know they're all going to agree with me. So I really wanted to get out to a demographic that was uninformed, even hostile to Israel, in an attempt to, have a dialogue, a debate. I didn't expect I would have been as successful as I have been in getting such positive feedback. And that's been a real confidence booster to me, to give me the confidence to argue with the most intellectually gifted anti-Israel activist. I feel confident enough that I can debate with them because I truly believe I know my subject matter. So, and again, I think I'm doing what I was always bound to do. If it would have, when you're young and have got a growing family, politics doesn't pay that well, especially if you're not successful in it. I wanted to go into politics, but it wasn't going to pay the electric bills or put food on the table for 4 kids. So banking and finance when I was a young man was fantastically well rewarded, and that's what I went into. And I must say, it served me well and given me the opportunity to do what I'm doing now, which I love equally as much.
Yeah, no, it feels good when you believe that you are doing the right thing, and it kind of suits your personality, your intent, your life objectives. I think there's no sentiment that can be compared to that. No, it's just unique. So it totally resonates with some of the things I've ever experienced recently. But tell me about, just to finalize, what is it in the pipeline? What projects you want to develop in the next couple of years?
My wife and I, she wants to divorce me because I've started the process of Aliyah. So, so we're going through that argument at the moment. I'm trying to convince her that that's what we should be doing, because I truly feel that Israel, I always wanted to do it, but she was very reluctant. But because she believes that it's uncomfortable in the UK at the moment, I've just started that process rolling, and have got a file opened up with the Jewish Agency. So it's quite a complex, time-consuming process, but I've started making the moves. Whether we will or not is another matter. On the political research and pro-Israel activism, I've appeared numerous times recently, and will continue to appear on a major Indian news channel called Vision X News. Vision X News. It's 24/7. It's on YouTube, and it has a huge audience, of which the vast majority are pro-Israel. I read recently that India was the only country in the world that never persecuted its Jewish population. Never. The only country in the world where there was a Jewish population that was not persecuted.
That's impressive. Huh?
So it is impressive. And we have huge, or Israel, I should say, and the Jewish people have huge support in India, as you probably know. I'm sure I think you've mentioned you've been there.
Yes. Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm trying to leverage up on that by getting into other countries, for them to interview me on all things Israel. I've had a couple of offers, but before I do that, so I have to do my due diligence and research to make sure that they are who they say they are, and nothing more sinister, which I did with News Exvision. Apart from that, I've been asked to write some articles for some more high-profile magazines, but again, I'm reluctant to do so. Other than boost my own profile, I'd be only preaching to the converted. I want to get out to those who are antagonistic, who are lacking in knowledge, who are anti everything that I'm for, because I think that's the best way to change hearts and minds. Well, although I do think a better way is if Israel became more savvy in our media abilities. So nothing more than that. We like our holidays. I'm going away for most of September with my wife, on a cruise with friends. And apart from that, please God, stay fit and healthy enough to do more of what I'm doing at the moment. But I must say, I appreciate you having me on your podcast. It's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. So, and I want to wish you all the best in your personal and professional ventures, and best of luck also on the Tulsi TV meeting on is it the 9th of August you mentioned?
Yes, 9th of August, that's right, this coming Saturday.
So pretty soon. I thought about attending that, but unfortunately I'm tired here in Ireland, but maybe there'll be a second edition next year or so, and I will join.
I'll keep you in the loop.
Please, yeah. So I appreciate that, and I also want to highlight your courage, because there are not many of us approaching the other side, and you are. So I really I really feel admiration for the way you approach these subjects.
Thank you.
I think it's very different from many others out there. So thanks for this. Best of luck with every single project. And I also want to thank the viewers who stayed with us, who enjoyed the conversation. Best way to express satisfaction is to press the like button below. And if they know someone who is into this sort of conversation and they haven't watched, no problem. This will stay available in YouTube. This is not going to be erased unless YouTube does it on my behalf. But I think we didn't say anything hairy here. So make sure to share. And if you have any comment, you can still write it. We will reply later on, no problem. And if you haven't subscribed, please, that's the best way to make sure the content is well distributed. We'll be back on Wednesday with my co-host, with Marco Alexander. We have two guests. I'm not going to announce their names because they are not fully confirmed. But yeah, we're going to have a discussion around some Israeli-related topic that will be announced in the YouTube tomorrow. So stay around, and for the time being, enjoy your evening. Take care.